Can I borrow your mom for today?
Can I borrow your mom for today? The billionaire's son asked. The little girl said yes. She had never said yes to a stranger before. Not once. Not to Candy, not to a dare, not even to the new kid who wanted to trade seats at lunch. But when the boy in the pressed navy blazer looked at her with eyes like he hadn't slept in a year and asked,
Can I borrow your mom for today?
6-year-old Ren Delaney didn't laugh. She didn't run. She didn't tell a teacher. She froze. Then she said yes. If you've ever wondered what happens when the loneliest boy in the world meets the warmest family in it, stay until the end. Because what this little girl did next didn't just change one boy's life. It cracked open a custody war, exposed a mother's betrayal, and forced a billionaire to learn, at 36 years old, how to actually be a father. And it all started with a question no adult would have ever thought to ask. Field day at Brookhaven Primary was chaos in the best way. Streamers snapped in the wind, a whistle shrieked somewhere near the sack races, and 40 children screamed at a volume only 6-year-olds could sustain for 6 straight hours. In the middle of it stood one boy who wasn't screaming at all. Theo Kong stood at the edge of the fence. Blazer buttoned to the top even in the heat. Backpack straps gripped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. He wasn't watching the games. He was watching the gate. Ren noticed him. The way kids notice things, adults have trained themselves not to see. "You're not playing," she said, walking right up to him, like they'd known each other for years. "I'm waiting," Theo said. "For who?" He didn't answer that. He just looked back at the gate. "Do you have a mom here?" Ren asked, tilting her head. "Everyone else has a mom or a dad here. I have my mom. She's over there in the yellow dress." "I don't have anyone here," Theo said quietly, like it was a fact he'd made peace with a long time ago. "My dad said he'd try." "Try isn't the same as coming," Ren said, with the blunt honesty only a child can get away with. "No," Theo agreed. "It's not." There was a silence that stretched a beat too long for 2 6-year-olds standing in the sun. Then Theo said something that surprised even himself. "Is that your mom? The one in the yellow dress?" "Yeah." "Can I borrow her?" Ren blinked. "Borrow her?" "Just for the 3-legged race," Theo said quickly, like he needed to explain himself before she said no. "I'll give her back, before school ends. I promise. Everyone needs a partner, and I don't have one, and you already have a partner, probably. But maybe she could—" "Okay," Ren said. Theo stopped talking mid-sentence. "Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's go ask her." Marin Delaney was refilling a water bottle when her daughter arrived, towing a small, solemn boy she'd never seen before. "Mom, this is Theo. He wants to borrow you." Marin laughed before she caught herself. "Borrow me?" "For the race," Theo said. And then, formally, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror that morning, "I would return you before school ends. I don't need you for very long." Marin looked at him properly, then. The ironed collar, the shoes, too polished for a field of grass and mud, and underneath all of it, a boy who kept glancing at the gate like he was afraid something might happen if he stopped. She crouched to his eye level. "What's your name again?" "Theo." "Kong Minjun Kong, technically. But Theo's easier." "Well, Theo," Marin said, "where are your parents?" Something flickered across his face. Not sadness exactly. Something older than that. He looked at the gate again and said nothing. Marin didn't push. She'd learned, in 6 years of parenting, that some doors open faster if you don't knock too hard. "All right," she said instead, holding out her hand. I'm officially borrowed, but only until the race is over. Deal, Theo said, and for just a second, something like relief broke across his face. The three-legged race was a disaster in the most joyful way possible. Ren and Theo's legs were tied together with a red ribbon, and neither of them could agree on which leg moved first. Left! Move your left! Ren shouted. That is my left. No, my left, which is your right. Just go. They fell twice before the starting whistle even blew. By the third attempt, they'd found a lurching, off-balance rhythm that looked less like running and more like a very determined, three-legged crab. You're my borrowed brother now, Ren announced mid-race, completely serious. I'm not your brother, Theo said between breaths. I'm borrowed. Until the gate. Then I go home. Fine. Borrowed brother until the gate. They didn't win. They didn't even place. They tumbled across the finish line in a heap, laughing so hard neither of them could stand up right away. And for 1 full minute, Theo Kang forgot to check the gate at all. Afterward, the field buzzed with parents taking photos and kids comparing grass stains. Marin spread a blanket for lunch, and Ren, without asking anyone, patted the space beside her. Sit, borrowed brother. Theo hesitated. I have my own lunch. My driver packed it. Sit anyway. He sat. Marin, without a word, slid a second plate beside Ren's. Sandwiches cut into triangles, a small container of strawberries, a juice box with a bent straw already poking through the foil. Theo stared at the plate like it might be a trick. You don't have to eat it, Marin said gently, misreading his hesitation as pickiness. It's not that, Theo said, very quietly. Nobody's ever packed me a lunch before. The words landed heavier than a 6-year-old should have been able to throw them. Marin went still. Ren, for once, didn't say anything either. My dad has a chef, Theo continued, almost apologetic, like he was worried he'd said something wrong. And the nannies do the sandwiches sometimes, but they're for everyone, not just for me. Marin reached over and adjusted the napkin on his lap, buying herself a second before she trusted her voice. Well, she said finally, this one's just for you. Theo picked up a triangle sandwich, like it was made of glass. He took one small bite. It's good, he said, surprised, like he hadn't expected food to taste like anything in particular. Told you, Ren said, grinning, and pushed her juice box toward him. Here, borrowed families share juice. For the first time all day, Theo smiled. Really smiled. Not the polite closed-mouth version he probably used for photographs. That was when the black SUV pulled through the gate. It didn't belong on a school field crowded with minivans and folding chairs. It was too clean, too dark, too quiet as it rolled to a stop. Theo's smile vanished before the door even opened. A man stepped out. Tailored suit, tie still knotted despite the heat, eyes scanning the crowd with the particular urgency of someone counting the cost of being late. Callum Kang found his son fast. Relief crossed his face for exactly 1 second before something more complicated replaced it. Theo didn't run to him. He sat where he was, juice box in hand, watching his father cross the field, the way you'd watch weather you weren't sure was going to pass or get worse. Callum crouched in front of him, ignoring the grass stains that would ruin his trousers. I'm sorry, he said. No excuse, no explanation, just that. Theo studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Not forgiveness exactly, but an acknowledgement that the apology had landed somewhere real. This is Ren, Theo said finally, gesturing. And her mom, Marin. I borrowed her for the race. Callum looked up at Marin properly for the first time. borrowed, he repeated slowly. He returned me on time, Marin said, straight-faced. Good as new. Something almost like a laugh escaped Callum. Rusty, like a mechanism that hadn't been used in a while. Thank you, he said, and it came out heavier than the two words should have carried. For, whatever this was, kids cherish the happy afternoons, Marin said simply. Not the expensive ones. He had a good one today. Callum didn't answer that. He just looked at his son a moment longer than necessary before standing. The ride home was silent, except for the hum of tires. Theo held the extra juice box Wren had pressed into his hands at the gate. For later, she'd said. Like it was something precious. Callum watched him in the rearview mirror and understood, with the particular ache of a parent arriving too late to a realization, that his son was happier holding a $2 juice box than he had ever looked in the toy room that took up an entire wing of their house. Ashcombe House greeted them the way it always did. Gravel drive raked into perfect lines, fountains running on schedule, 3 nannies waiting at the door with the practiced stillness of people paid to never be surprised by anything. It's too quiet here, Theo said to no one, shrugging off his blazer. Callum, halfway down the hall, stopped walking. He'd built this house to be flawless. Marble floors that never scuffed. A staff rotation that meant someone was always awake in case Theo needed anything at 3 a.m. Nothing broken, nothing late, nothing left to chance. And his son had just called it too quiet. That night, reviewing contracts he couldn't focus on, Callum found himself thinking not about the merger on his desk, but about a woman in a yellow dress who'd fed his son lunch like it was the easiest thing in the world. His assistant, Desmond, noticed. "You've read that paragraph 4 times, sir." "Have I?" "You have." Desmond hesitated. Master Theo seemed different tonight. Lighter. Callum didn't answer, but he didn't disagree either. The next morning, Theo did something he had never done before. He didn't ask for a new toy, a trip, or a later bedtime. He asked, quietly, over breakfast, "Can I go to Wren's house after school?" Callum set down his coffee. "You only met her yesterday." "I know. Can I go anyway?" There was a version of this conversation where Callum said no, where schedules, security concerns, and 100 reasonable objections won out. He looked at his son's face, hopeful in a way it almost never was, and heard himself say, "All right, I'll drive you myself." Marin's house, when they arrived, sounded like a home before it even looked like one. Laughter through an open window, something sizzling on a stove, a dog barking twice, and then losing interest. It smelled like butter and cinnamon. Theo stood on the porch for a second, just breathing it in, like it was a language he was relearning. "Pancakes," Wren announced, throwing the door open. "Buddy's making pancakes. You have to hide your plate, or he'll eat it for you." "Who's Buddy?" The answer arrived a moment later in the form of a barrel-chested older man, covered in a fine layer of flour, mid-chase after a stolen pancake, moving with the speed of someone half his age. "That one was mine," Gus bellowed, skidding into the hallway. He spotted Theo and stopped dead. "New recruit?" "This is Theo," Wren said. "He's borrowed. Everyone's borrowed until they steal a pancake," Gus said solemnly, and without warning, tossed one directly at Theo, who caught it with both hands, stunned. "Now you're one of us," Gus declared. "Congratulations. The pay is terrible and the hours are worse." Theo laughed, a real, surprised, unguarded laugh that seemed to catch even him off guard. "He prefers Buddy," Marin explained, appearing in the doorway with a dish towel over her shoulder. "Not Grandpa. Grandpa sounded in his words, too old for a man of his caliber. I contain multitudes, Gus said, already on to the next pancake. If you're already rooting for this family the way we are, go ahead and hit that like button right now, because it's about to get a lot more intense. The afternoon dissolved into the kind of chaos Theo had never been allowed to have. A water gun championship broke out in the backyard, Gus declaring himself undefeated champion, despite clear evidence of Ren soaking him from behind twice. Theo got hit directly in the face and laughed so hard he had to sit down. You've got good aim, Gus told him, impressed, wringing out his shirt. Where'd you learn that? Nowhere, Theo admitted. I've never done this before. Gus looked at him for a second too long, something unreadable passing behind his eyes before ruffling the boy's soaked hair. Well, you're a natural. Later, in the kitchen, Gus let Theo flip his own pancake for the first time. It landed half in the pan, half on the counter. Nobody cared. You know, Gus said to Callum, who'd lingered on the porch instead of leaving after drop-off, coffee in hand. I stopped trying to raise the perfect kid a long time ago. What did you raise instead? A kid who always knew she was loved, Gus said simply, nodding toward Marin through the window. That's it. That's the whole trick. Everything else sorts itself out. Callum turned that over in silence, the coffee going cold in his hand. Inside, Marin was quietly confiding to her father. Some days, I worry I'm not doing enough, that she deserves more than I can give her. Nobody's doing enough, Gus said, without looking up from the stove. You just keep showing up. That's the whole job description. Nobody tells you that part. Weeks passed like this. Theo's laughter stopped being a novelty and started being ordinary. He hummed under his breath now, something the nannies at Ashcombe House noted with quiet astonishment. Callum found himself staying for one coffee and leaving an hour later. Something in the architecture of his son's life was being rebuilt, plank by plank, in a kitchen that smelled like syrup. But not everyone was happy about it. From a car parked half a block down, a woman watched the house with an expression that could have been mistaken for grief, if grief ever curdled into something sharper. Sable Kong, Theo's mother, absent for reasons the boy never spoke of, watched her son laugh through a stranger's window and felt something in her chest twist that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with losing. She wasn't afraid of a custody battle. She was afraid of something worse, that her son might stop needing her at all. That fear made her reckless. She remembered, unwillingly, the last time Theo had looked at her, the way he now looked at Marin. Open, unguarded, certain he was safe. It had been years since she'd earned that look. She told herself she was only protecting her place in his life. Some quieter, more honest part of her understood she was really just protecting her pride. She picked up the phone anyway. Handle it, she said to the voice on the other end. Quietly, just make them nervous enough to back off. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. Ren and Theo were building a blanket fort in the living room when the front door slammed open without a knock. Two men, unfamiliar and unsmiling, pushed into the house. Where is she? One demanded, voice low and dangerous. Tell Sable's little friend to back off, or next time it won't just be a conversation. Marin froze, positioning herself instinctively between the men and the children. Ren grabbed Theo's hand. Gus stepped into the doorway between the men and his family, like he'd been standing there his whole life, waiting for this exact moment. You're in the wrong house, gentlemen, he said, voice calm in a way that was somehow more frightening than shouting would have been. One of the men shoved him. Gus staggered, but didn't fall, and didn't move an inch from where he was standing. Theo, Marin said sharply, get behind me. But Theo didn't hide. He stepped up beside Gus instead, small fists clenched, chin lifted, eyes locked on the intruders with a steadiness that startled everyone in the room, including himself. Leave, Theo said, voice shaking but clear. This is my family. The word landed like a thunderclap. My family. It was at that exact moment that Callum's car screeched into the driveway. He'd been 15 minutes away when Desmond flagged the alert. The security cameras he'd quietly had installed at Marin's house weeks earlier, a habit born from old betrayals he'd never fully explained, had caught the break-in the instant it began. Callum burst through the door to find Gus with one intruder already pinned against the wall, and his son standing tall beside him instead of cowering behind furniture. The relief that crossed Callum's face was almost violent in its intensity. Police arrived minutes later. The footage, clear, time-stamped, undeniable, left no room for doubt about who had sent the men or why. Sable's composure, famous among everyone who'd ever negotiated against her, cracked entirely under the weight of the evidence. She was arrested that evening. Callum said nothing throughout, watching in silence as the woman who had once shared his son's bedtime stories was led away in handcuffs. There was no triumph in his face, only a quiet, exhausted grief for what could have been, and gratitude for what hadn't been lost. That night, the house still smelled faintly of splintered wood where the door had been forced. Callum knelt and began sweeping broken glass without being asked, sleeves rolled to his elbows. You don't have to do that, Marin said softly, standing in the doorway. I want to, Callum said. I'm not protecting this house because it's valuable. I'm protecting what's inside it. He looked up at her. That's new for me, realizing the difference. Marin didn't answer right away. She just nodded, understanding exactly what it had cost him to say that out loud. Later, Gus found Theo sitting alone on the porch steps. Juice box, the same one, refilled a dozen times since, still somehow in his hand. Got something for you, Gus said, sitting down heavily beside him. He handed over a small, battered notebook, its cover soft from handling. Theo opened it. Taped to the first page was a single photograph. Theo and Wren, tangled together mid-fall at the three-legged race, both laughing so hard their eyes were shut. That's it? Just one picture? That's the start, Gus said. You fill in the rest yourself. Dates don't matter much. What matters is you remember how it felt. Write that part down before you forget it. Feelings fade faster than facts do. Theo traced the edge of the photograph with one finger. I don't want to forget any of it. Then don't, Gus said simply. That's the whole secret. Nobody can make you forget something you've decided to hold on to. Theo flipped to the second page, still blank, and pressed his hand flat against it, as if he could feel how much room there was left to fill. Will you help me remember the parts I get wrong? That's the only kind of help worth giving, Gus said. Nobody remembers anything perfectly alone. That's what family's for, filling in each other's gaps. Inside, Marin and Callum sat at the kitchen table long after the children had gone to bed, saying very little, both aware that something had shifted permanently between their two families and neither quite ready to name it yet. You gave him something I couldn't, Callum admitted finally. No amount of money bought what happened in this house. You gave him something too, Marin said. You showed up every single time after that first day. That's the part he'll remember. A week later, at Sunday dinner, because it was Sunday dinner now, an unspoken tradition nobody had officially declared, but everybody understood. Wren stood on her chair and announced, with the gravity of a queen issuing a decree. Theo isn't borrowed anymore. We're keeping him. Didn't say you could keep me, Gus said, deadpan, sliding another pancake onto Theo's plate. But here we are. Theo looked around the table, Marin laughing, Wren triumphant, Callum's hand resting easy on the back of his chair for once, instead of checking his watch, and said the two words that had been building in him for weeks, without him even realizing it. Grandpa Gus. Gus went very still for a moment, then cleared his throat gruffly and said nothing at all, which everyone at the table understood meant everything. The boy who once stood alone at a gate, waiting for someone who might not come, was finally, fully, home. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved us to write it, don't scroll away yet. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next one. Drop a comment telling us which moment hit you hardest, whether it was the lunch, the pancake fight, or that final Grandpa Gus. And smash the like button if you believe family is something you build, not something you're born into. We read every single comment, and we've got more stories like this one coming very soon. See you in the next video.